is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're continuing this conversation. How do we stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? What are your foundations? What are your core values, your guiding principles? Who are you at your inner core that is your foundation that helps you make decisions, that helps you really sift through, again, the noise, everything going on around you, and make decisions on what's truly important for you, for your family. Today, we're going to have here on the podcast Tami Sharp and Chris Zamora. I'm excited for you to hear from both of them. They own a company called Law Enforcement Coaching, and they're providing coaching and training to law enforcement professionals. And they're really bringing some non-traditional modalities or options for us taking care of our brains and our bodies, taking care of our health to the law enforcement world. And what I love about that is some of these things you'll hear them talk about are things that maybe you're totally closed off to. And the reason you're closed off to it is usually the person who's introducing it or training us on it is wearing some yoga pants or Lululemon or has dreadlocks or something else that's just a barrier for you. You're looking at them going, you don't get it. Like, you don't get us. You don't get the first responder community. But you're going to see, at least if you're watching on YouTube or if you dig around on their socials, you'll see that Tami and Chris are cut from a different cloth. They are from the first responder community, and they're bringing some tools to us that are going to help us get better. I actually learned about them because I was teaching a leadership class, and one of the students told me, "Hey, you got to check out this company. They're providing some great training." And that's when I reached out to Tami, and she and Chris said, "Absolutely, we'd love to come on the podcast." But before we get into the interview, I want to talk about Warrior's Heart. It's the hat I'm wearing today on this episode. Warrior's Heart is a PTSD and substance abuse recovery center in San Antonio, Texas, and in Virginia. And they are offering a warriors only environment where we can take care of our brains and bodies, where we can go to heal up, to do the really hard work, or at least the start of the really hard work of getting better. I didn't go to Warrior's Heart. I went to a different place. But I firmly believe in Warrior's Heart's mission, and I've talked with folks that have graduated their program. I've interviewed their not their CEO, but one of their founders. They're doing great work. So even if you don't know anyone that's struggling, check out Warrior's Heart. Know of the resource. That way, if you or if your loved one or if your friend or partner at some point in their life starts to struggle and you're from this first responder community, you'll be aware of this resource. Check them out today. It'll be down in the show notes. With that, let's get into this interview with Tami and Chris. Tami Sharp and Chris Zamora, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I appreciate you all reaching out and us beginning this conversation offline. I'm excited to get into both of your experiences and then what you're doing now. For the listeners that have never heard either one of your names before, could you both just do a brief introduction of who you are?
Okay. Chris, you can go first.
Tami, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I am Tami Sharp. I am the co-founder of Law Enforcement Coaching. I grew up in Washington State, up in a little podunk place. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but I'm from Concrete, Washington. And my dad was an outpost deputy sheriff for Whatcom County up in New Halem for about 20 years. So I grew up in a law enforcement family. It was the 80s. So I learned how to run radar when I was 4. I went all his, traffic stops and really grew up in the patrol car. Now I reside in Arizona. So the background you see, it looks like snow. It's just that we call it Arizona snow. That is sun. That is just bright, hot sun. But we do have trees. If you go north in Arizona, you can come up and get away from the hot heat. It's about 110 down in Phoenix area right now. So I grew up in Washington. I lived on Maui for about 10 years, and then moved to Arizona. I am a healing arts practitioner. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, life coach. I do Reiki energy work. I'm finishing up my doctorate in metaphysical science. So if you want to go crystals and chakras and woo-woo, I can talk about it all day, but I take a very logical, skeptical approach, honestly, to all of that.
I love it. Thank you, Tami. Chris, brother?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Chris Zamora. I'm a retired police officer from Arizona, from Gilbert PD, and I did 23 years, retired in 2021. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, a demonic Reiki practitioner, a yoga instructor as well. Um, my police experience right out of the academy, they put me undercover to go back to high school. So I did 21 Jump Street style
Holy smokes.
right out of the academy. So I did that for 2 semesters, and then throughout my police career, I did a second stint working narcotics. This time I went undercover in the Sinaloa cartel. I did robbery, homicide, and IA. So I got to experience different areas of law enforcement. So I get to bring that experience into law enforcement coaching. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also the other co-CEO of law enforcement coaching.
And I forgot to mention, we're in relationship with each other for transparency. So all the
Yeah, there you
things.
go. And that too.
So both the Tami, you came from a law enforcement background with your dad, and you're in a relationship with a retired police officer. So I mean, you guys are really in the know in reference to the impact that this job has on
Yeah.
individuals and on the family.
Yeah. So growing up with my dad, I avoided dating law enforcement and first responders my entire adult life because I had that stress growing up as a kid and
Yeah.
I didn't want it in my relationship. And then we fell in love and we were in a relationship. We're in business together. We're coaching cops. I'm like, all right, fortunately he's retired. So that stress has gone away, but it's,
Yeah.
I have a calling apparently.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Chris, this came up into my mind, and I don't know why my mind stopped there, but I got to ask, did you do the homework? Like when you were doing your 21 Jump Street special assignment, were you required to do homework?
Well, it's funny. I was not required to do homework. However, I did my homework first semester, and I was actually pulling A's and B's, right? And I would stay up late doing homework on top of writing police reports and doing my other stuff. And then it was finals time. It was December. And I found myself at midnight up studying for finals. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, wait, I'm a grown ass man. I don't have to do this, right? So second semester, I stopped doing homework. That's a problem now because now the teachers, my grades went from A's and B's to D's and F's. Now my teachers are reaching out to my dad trying to figure out why are my grades so low. And so one morning, my English teacher, it was her first year teaching, young teacher, she wants to save the world, obviously. So she came up to me one day. She goes, "Hey, my undercover name was Tommy Cruz. That's another story. But anyway, she goes, "Hey, Tommy, what's your address?" I asked her, I'm like, "Well, why?" I go, "What? Why?" She goes, "Well, I tried to go to your house last night to talk to your dad. He's not returning my phone calls, but I couldn't find it. What's your address?" And I'm like, "Well, what address do you have?" And so she told me the address, so I just mixed up the numbers. I go, "No, oh, you got the address wrong. It's actually," and I mixed up the numbers for her. She goes, "Well, have your dad call me. I need to talk to him because your grades have really slipped this second semester and we need a meeting." So I realized, oh man, I got to do my homework now.
Well, that's
So
what was going through my mind. If your
yeah.
cover needs to be with the teachers as well, and if I know anything about the little bit of plainclothes work I did, not straight up undercover, but plainclothes work I did, you got to be fooling everybody. Like you have to be in character, in role, because all it takes is that one person who's a good person that's going to have loose lips, and now all of a sudden the entire operation's down.
Oh yeah, and the smallest details make a big difference. Even my transcripts, so that year, that particular of all years, this particular year, a big measles outbreak happens at the school, right? So of course, the secretary is looking at my records. He's not seeing any shot records for me for measles. So she calls my old school, which actually does exist. It's in Tucson, Arizona. My younger brothers were attending that school at the time, so I knew a little bit about it. It was Choya High School, and all of a sudden I get called into the office one morning, and the secretary, who's just like she's doing her own investigation, I get called in the office, And I'm like, hey, I'm Tommy. You guys called me in the office. She goes, yes. Ah, Mr. Cruz. Where are you from? I'm like, Tucson. And she goes, oh, really? And what school did you come from in Tucson? I go, Choya High. She goes, that's interesting because I just called Choya High looking for your shot records. And they don't have any record of you, Mr. Cruz. Now, why is that? Right? So this lady's like almost blowing my cover. She's the secretary. So yeah, I had to get myself out of that one pretty quick. So anyway, that's another story for another podcast if you want to do that. But
Totally. No, totally. I just thought that was interesting. I was definitely, by the time I became a school resource or even a cop, I was too old looking because I'd been in the Air Force first. But we fired a couple of those cops that I look at and think, you look like you're in junior high. But they're great cops. It's just they have very, very young faces.
faces, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Tammy, your dad retired. You said he was in an outpost. What was that like? Was he like literally the only deputy in that area, or?
Yeah. So Whatcom County is Bellingham, Washington. So it's up north. It's about a half hour from the Canadian border. And it's really weird because in order to get to New Halem, you have to go about 2 hours into the mountains. But if you were able to cut through the mountains, it'd be like 20 minutes. But backside of Mount Baker. So you go all the way around through Skagit County and then up to New Halem. And our town it's the Seattle City Light Hydroelectric Project. So it's where the dams and the river go through and where they get their electric. So it's like a working camp town, and it's 1 mile stretch. And then there's just a row of houses, and we had our house. The supervisor for the powerhouse lived there. That was one of my best friend's dads. And then there were just, there's park rangers, the people that work at the little general store, the, tour center, and that was it. And so he was responsible for a 72-mile radius, all the way over the pass to Eastern Washington. And then his closest backup was one state trooper that lived 14 miles away from us. And then the next PD was Concrete PD, which had all of like 3 people in it. And that's where I went to school. So I had a 45-minute bus ride down a windy mountain road. But he was responsible for that whole area. So when things happened, the state trooper and he, who was 14 miles away, so like if something was going down, like it's still going to take a minute for him to have anything. So we did have a park ranger there. And yeah, just crazy stories. We had a guy tripping out on LSD or something at the campground, and he was coming through the town and he's screaming and hollering and causing a ruckus. And so that all went down right in front of my house. And it took, the town and my dad and the park ranger to try to pin this guy down in the back of the car. And I'm standing there, I'm in my nightgown, I'm holding my teddy bear at the front door, just watching it all go down, like what's happening. And my dad came in and I was like, Dad, you're bleeding. Well, the guy had bit a chunk out of his arm.
Oh
So
my
then
gosh.
in order to take this guy to jail, he had to drive 2 hours. So you know that he's not coming back for a while.
Yeah.
And then he was just like, now I gotta go to the hospital and I gotta get, all the things. He was mad. But yeah, we had up in the mountains, we'd get like several feet of snow.
Oh, I bet.
And every once in a while, people would try to break into the general store because that's all that's in this town. There's no bar, there's no gas station, there's a post office and a general store. That's it. No church. But they would try to break in. And I remember one year somebody tried to break in and they tried to run from my dad, but there's snow. So they took a piece of plywood and like tried to put that over their tracks. And then my dad just followed the tracks and we're like, where are you going?
Followed the track of the big plywood because
Yeah,
that
right.
leaves a mark as well, folks. Dumb criminals. So I was a cop's kid, or I guess I am a cop's kid. That's just, I don't think of myself as a kid anymore. And this was back in the 80s and 90s to where I rode with my dad. I think I was like 10 or 11 years old the first time I rode with my dad. And that first time we had a homicide and it was a big call. I actually have a copy of the police report now just because of the memories of it. How young were you when your dad would actually let you do formal ride-alongs where you're riding with him during the entire shift?
Oh, I mean, I tell everybody my introduction is I learned to run radar when I was 4 because I did. Like as soon as I could walk and talk, it was like, okay, you're speeding. Uh, so I would go with him all the time, especially, we had to go to Bellingham usually about once a week. So we're taking that trip, and he had multiple jurisdictions. So once we went into Skagit County, he still can pull people over. So when we're going, he was the kind of cop that you're driving, he doesn't need to flip the lights. He's going to shove his badge and be like, pull over. And so it would take hours just to get anywhere. But I'd go sit on the side of the road with him. We'd hide, we'd run radar. I would run radar. I decide who we pull over if they were, and I still have this rule. Like if you're going, less than 5 miles an hour, let them go. 7 to 10, we're going to pull you over, give you a warning. If it's over 15, you're getting an automatic ticket. And I know that's kind of like general rule of thumb as well, but that was my rule and I still drive by that, which is probably not a good thing. No, but it was all the time. I grew up, I drive all the time when we go places because I get car sick because if I wasn't in the front, if my mom was in there, I had to sit in the back.
Yeah.
And it was with the plexiglass window. So if he didn't want to hear me, he just closed that.
I think this might be a good thing for all parents to have. I mean, I don't know, see, Child Protective Services might get involved, but I'm just saying there's
Yeah,
something
there was
about
no
the
air conditioning back there.
beauty of oh no, there isn't. Yeah. I'm surprised we still don't have that in most police cars. This is what blows me away though, Tami, just because of your upbringing, Chris, with your law enforcement experience. Honestly, the work you are in right now, the modalities that you all are certified in and practice are like yoga pant wearing, beads around the neck, you know, this is what I'm picturing. And I've interviewed some of those folks for the podcast, and they're amazing human beings who love first responders, and they're trying to do great work for them, right? But neither one of you come across with that vibe at all. How did you get into doing some of this less conventional, maybe, ways of taking care of our brain and body?
Well, for me, I was actually at of all trainings, I was at a tactical training. It was called TAC Flow. And, there's a lot of SWAT cops in there and some Navy SEALs. And we're training. And on a break, I had mentioned that I was thinking about becoming a clinical hypnotherapist. And one of the guys in there, his wife was attending a school that was local where we lived. I said, there's actually a school here for that. And I'm like, really? So I got the information and I actually went. Now, what got me into wanting to do hypnotherapy? I was part of CIT with my agency, and we were teaching East Valley first responder training in CIT. I was tasked with teaching about suicide awareness. And I began to run the numbers on suicide, active duty law enforcement committing suicide for the previous 5 years. And the average came out to about 100. Well, actually, and I wanted to compare it to officers that were killed in a line of duty for the same previous 5 years. And the number for officers that were killed in a line of duty averaged right around, I want to say like 60 officers per year nationwide. And then I looked at the numbers for suicide, active duty officers committing suicide, and it was like 160 something per year. Almost 3 times we were committing suicide at a far higher rate than we were getting killed in a line of duty. And that just blew my mind. And so knowing how first responders are, we don't want to be on medication because it hinders our performance, right? And so what kind of holistic modalities can we utilize to help us regain that balance? Hypnotherapy was one of the things that I researched. And the more I read about it and how we have the power of the mind and we can program the mind for positive things, I was really digging it. And so the more I read about it, the more I wanted to get into it. And then I just happened to be at this training where somebody knew where the school was, and that's what led me into that. That opened the door to other things like transformational life coaching and yoga. You mentioned yoga, bead wearing, man bun, and all that stuff, which is not me, period. But the relaxation aspect of it, the breath work of it,
Yeah.
all of that translates to what we do in law enforcement. And we know with my background, I looked at yoga as not just for relaxation, but also to help us with tactics. I was training in MMA at the time, and I noticed that yoga actually helped with, BJJ. It helped with MMA, and the flexibility. And so now I teach yoga for strength, stability, flexibility, and mobility. And these are all things that you're going to need in a fight, whether it's an MMA fight or BJJ or a gunfight. officers that get into gunfights, you're not going to be in a standing position like we are at the range in a nice sterile environment. You're going to be behind cover. Your body is going to be contorted in weird ways. This is where yoga actually helps with that, right?
Yes.
So getting into these positions, creating strength in those muscles that we never ever exercise, but we need it for combative purposes. So I teach yoga for combative performance. So anyway, a little bit about why I got into it, and the more I learned, the more I could translate it. And I actually had a fellow yogi come to me one day, and she goes, I tried giving free classes to the fire department and the police department, and nobody showed up. Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing wrong? And I said, well, how are you advertising it? And she actually showed me a flyer that she used, and it was the typical love and light and da 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 da, and I'm gonna walk on water kind of
Some balancing
nonsense.
rocks, you know.
Yeah, right. And I go, no, 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 no. I go, you've got to speak their language.
Yeah.
How is this going to be beneficial to them? And use their language. And so it was at that moment I'm like, no, I mean, let me show you how it's done and how we do it. And so that's what kind of got me into that. Anyway, Tami, you're up.
If before Tammy, but I want to hear from you too. But what was the word you used? Yoga for combative performance, or
Yeah, yeah, yoga for combative performance. I want them, some of my buddies are like, no, don't call it yoga, call it combative stretching or, combat stretching or whatever. I go, no, no. I want them to know that this is yoga. I'm not trying to do the bait and switch with them.
yeah,
This is yoga, but I'm going to show you how you can use it combative performance.
yeah,
And the moment I do that, and at the end of my class, I'll actually have a rifle and a pistol, and I'll have them do movement drills, and I'll have them freeze. I'll say threat, and they'll freeze, and I'll make them freeze in a yoga pose, right?
yes,
It's not going to be identical yoga pose, but it's going to be fairly close, or it's going to be in a pose or a posture where the actual yoga posture benefits that position, right?
yeah,
And I'll call them out. I'll say, okay, threat, they'll freeze, and I'll ask them what posture are you holding? Warrior one. I mean, they call it out, and I'll have them, okay, move. Threat, what posture are you holding? Warrior two. Hair pose. Baby cobra. Baby cobra is your prone position, right? That's where you're shooting at 100 yards or 100 yards plus, right? That's baby cobra. And I always wondered when I would go and qualify with my rifle. At the end of the day, I always felt great, and it's like, why do I feel so good? I always figured I had this big boomstick, and this is what made me happy. Well, no, we're holding postures, we're moving, and we're doing breath work. At 100 yards, how important is breathing?
yeah,
It's very important, right? And so you're very conscious of your breath work when you're at the rifle range, right? And I always wondered, why do I feel so good? And I'm outdoors as well. Well, it's because we're doing yoga, and I never realized it until I actually started training on how to be a yoga instructor. So
yeah.
anyway, sorry
I
about that long rant.
No, I love that. And here's the deal: words matter. And the leadership instructing I do for Washington State law enforcement, that's one of my mantras: is words matter. One of my co-instructors, Matt Porter, says words are powerful icons. And I'm a huge fan of the Huberman Lab podcast, Dr. Andrew Huberman. He, instead of talking about yoga nidra, he has renamed it uh, non-sleep deep rest. It actually describes what yoga nidra is, and he recognized that there were some people that were going to get tripped up over the vocabulary. And instead of people getting tripped up, he renamed it with something that doesn't have his name on it. He's not trying to gain finances from it. His whole big, stick is, zero cost to consumer. So I love the fact that you're giving it a name that's going to connect with the consumer. In this case, law enforcement officers. That's so huge. Tammy,
Well,
how about?
that
Oh, go ahead.
just to piggyback on that really quick,
Yeah,
you're right.
please.
The wording does matter. And I actually, when I was going through training, my yoga instructor, I have so much respect for, and she's very well known all over the world and I'm very fortunate to have been in her class. But I renamed some of these postures because I'm not going to teach goddess pose to a bunch of cops, right? I'm not going to call it goddess pose. I call that gunfighter pose because literally your hands are up here and you're in a squatting position. But this equates to you've got a threat in front of you, you hear stimulus behind you, and now you've got to transition your weapon back. This translates to that. So I call that gunfighter pose. Well, when I taught my first class while I was in training, I taught it to law enforcement, and I wanted to share my experience with my class. My class thought it was cool. They were like, "Oh my God, that's so great. That's so awesome." But my instructor didn't think so. She thought I was trying to change yoga. And yoga is only one way it's taught, and it's taught the way that she's teaching it. And so we actually in class we had this thing happen, and it was very uncomfortable. But she did not want me calling it gunfighter pose. And I explained to her, if I call it goddess pose, they're going to turn off. They're not going to want to go any further. Much like you don't like it when I call it gunfighter pose, you're upset about it. This is how they're going to feel. They're not going to resonate with it like you don't resonate with the name. But I've got it. I know my demographic of people that I'm teaching, and I know what resonates with them, and that will resonate with them. And so again, I mean, I'm lucky I got through the class. I got through
Sounds
the
like you
class.
almost failed again. You can't
I,
get through
almo- I
21 Jump Street,
oh,
and now you
I
can't get through yoga, Chris. Come on.
I was worried for a little bit there, but she was very cool about it. I mean, but again, it's that cultural competence that we need to have when we're dealing with a specific demographic of people. I'm not going to go into a traditional yoga studio and call goddess pose gunfighter pose because none
No,
of those people are going to resonate with that.
100%.
So
Words
yeah,
matter in all of our audiences. I like it.
absolutely. Yep.
And that's really everything that we do. I mean, I can go full what I call woo woo. I can go full spectrum woo woo. You want to talk chakras and crystals and past life regressions and essential oils. I love all of it. I am like, namaste, whatever. But we translate it so that it actually resonates and makes sense. Because I grew up, I'm friends. I lived on Maui for 10 years, so I can absolutely fit in with my hippie crowd. I call myself a well-balanced hippie. Like, I understand we need to be sustainable. There's things that we need to honor. But I was fascinated with, the past life regression is what really got me into hypnotherapy to start. And then everything else, I'm fascinated with how the mind works. And
Yes.
living on Maui, I've had so many coincidental, unexplainable experiences where I had to be like, hey, there's something else going on beyond what we see. And what's really cool, because Chris and I are also like, we get into like paranormal stuff all the time. And what's cool is that cops, they have their stories. Like there's stuff that you experience on a call that, somebody is alive that should not be alive. You're looking at the car and you're like, how did that happen? So I've always just had that curiosity of like, what is it? Like, what's going on? So I take it from more of a, like I said before, like kind of a skeptical. I mean, my whole, everybody around me is got huge bullshit detectors, basically. And I do too. So I really got into it to be like, I'm the biggest skeptic. I'm like, what is this hands woo woo moving your energy stuff? Like, what is that? But there's something to it. So I continue to study it and figure out like what is this? So
How did you get open to it in the first place? Again, you got a dad that's literally off, if I was hearing correctly, is off duty pulling his badge out and screaming at people, pull over.
yeah.
I'm the law. And you're a product of that from a very early age. Was it during your time in Hawaii? I have a Hawaiian wife, and I think she's loopy. No, I'm just joking. Jaimie, I love you if you're actually listening to this episode. You rock, sweetheart. No, but for real, like when was that season, or were you maybe always just open to? Were you always curious to other points of view?
Um, there's a couple things. So growing up in New Halem before the internet, and being so far removed, my town, there was only two other kids my age that were girls. And we don't, to this day, we're still friends, but we don't call ourselves best friends. We're sisters. We didn't choose each other. We were stuck together. And we are
Just like
still
biological family.
100%. It was like, if you want somebody to play with, that's who you're going to play with. So, um, we were in the mountains. We were in nature. Like we had this big grass field and we had a river, we had woods behind us. And so I grew up talking to trees, basically, really. I was, learning how to tune into nature and feel that. So I grew up, and then Washington is a lot of Native American history. Um, so I was very interested in the Native ways of life, and I was always drawn to that. My dad was retired Air Force. He had raised three boys that are my half brothers are 20 years older than me, and two of them are identical twins. So they did not get away with much. I didn't get away with shit. Like by the time I came around, Air Force boys, twins, law enforcement, little princess.
Yeah.
So the one of the things that got me into the way, like, our words have power, our mind creates our reality. So this is a story I share all the time, but my dad, when I was 11 years old, he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, and they gave him 6 months to live, best case scenario. Like, you're done. He was like, no, I'm not. My job is to see my daughter turn 18. She's an adult, then I'm done. And so he created his reality. He did radiation, not chemo at the time. And he went into complete remission, zero PSA count, lived for 7 years. His story he created was he wanted to see me graduate high school. Once I turned 18, anything after that, anytime, was extra time. So when I graduated, I was 17. He was the president of the school board, so he actually got to hand me my diploma. So that was super special. I turned 18 in August. I moved out. I went up to Vancouver for school up there. I was out of the house for 3 months. I was 18 for 3 months. His cancer came back. 3 months later, I was the one out of all of the family that made the decision to take him off life support, because I had listened to the story he had created. He always said if it came back, he didn't want to fight again.
Yep.
So I learned the power of the mind. And I also learned through watching Western medicine practices that you need to question. Just because somebody comes in a white coat and is an authority figure and they tell you how it is, do your research. And does that feel right for you? So I learned, I had a chip on my shoulder with Western medicine for a long time. I blamed the doctors for my dad. The second round, they gave him too much chemo. His tongue was black. They basically fried him from the inside out. And he was diabetic at the same time, but he could only stomach ice cream. He was absolutely miserable at the end. So I hated doctors for a long time. After my dad passed and I was grieving, well, there's a whole nother series of events. I ended up in a relationship, and then we moved to Maui to get away from everybody up there because drugs took over the valley up there really hard. So we went to get away from all of that. And then living on Maui is where I started learning my spiritual lessons. My ex-husband was a drug addict, so I had to I kicked him off the island, sent him back to go get help. I'm an after school special. Like, my dad threatened me so much that I'll admit I've smoked weed like 3 times.
Gosh.
Oh my God.
It's over.
Well, you may as well start using acid now, because that's what's next.
Yeah, no, but I never got into it because he really did put the fear into me for all of that. But yeah, I lived on Maui. I ended up owning a bar, which was a whole thing. So a little rundown local dive bar in Wailuku, and it was awesome. But I also had this moral dilemma because I was serving alcohol to alcoholics. Like, I would have people come in after their AA meeting being like, give me a shot. And I'm like, if I don't give it to them, they're going to go get it somewhere else. So at least I can monitor them.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff that came into why I got into all of this. But like what Chris was saying, we have these friends in the healing community, the yoga community, that they want to work with first responders. They're very well intentioned, but I had friends all the time. They're like, oh, the PD wouldn't even look at me. I'm like, well, did you show up dressed like that? Yeah. With your dreadlocks and your patchouli? I'm like, they're not going to talk to you. Yeah. You have to actually understand. We really talk about the cultural competence and that experience and understanding the mindset that, we know as soon as we walk into a room full of cops, we have them, they're reading us, we're reading them. Everybody's looking at who's calling bullshit on who. And so we come with all of this healing stuff from a very logical, analytical side.
Let me just paint this picture that I'm hearing. And if I'm wrong in any of this, I want you guys to let me know. I mean, Tami, you're growing up in this law enforcement background that usually isn't very open to this type of stuff. However, you're also living in the outdoors. So you're seeing the world, nature, you're exposed to Native American spiritual beliefs. I mean, all of it's kind of giving you some curiosity and, And Chris, you're growing up as a cop, getting a lot of experience. I mean, I like to jump on the 21 Jump Street just because I think that's fun. But I mean, you talked about going undercover within the cartel organization, being on the SWAT team. So you guys have these different experiences. Chris, you're confronted with the fact. I remember getting those stats in 2019. I think I gave a talk in 2019 or 2020, and that was when I first was aware of the previous few years, our suicide rates eclipsing homicide rates for police officers on duty. And so you you guys just have this kind of this convergence of this problem, especially with your experience, Tami, with Western medicine, and seeing a solution for our warrior community, for our first responders. And is that at what point did your company law enforcement coaching, like when was it actually formed? Like, all right, we have a fix here. Maybe not the only fix, but we have definitely one of the solutions or a part of the solution to help this class of warriors.
So there's several moving parts to that, but it started, so the school that Chris was talking about, that's where we met. So I had been fully immersed there for a couple of years for their program. I was getting a degree in transformational psychology, getting all my certificates and everything. And Chris and I ended up meeting in a class for NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. So if anybody is familiar with Tony Robbins and the work he does NLP. That's what that is. Um, and I'd been going to school for a long time, and it was a lot of man bun, Burning Man kind of guys. I don't like the most polite way to say that. And we're in this class, and I just remember the teacher, we were talking about eye movement and where people are looking when you're lying, when you're making things up, when you're trying to remember. And you use that with NLP. And I just remember the teacher asking Chris, oh, in the line of work that you do, how does that come in? And it was like, the memory is really funny because I just kind of like looked at him. I'm like, hold on, who's this guy? He is not like anybody else in this school. Where did he come from? And we ended up meeting. Our class went to lunch that day, and we kind of just had some similarities, and we started connecting. And then we just, again, the paranormal stuff came into play, and we just had to say we checked all of the boxes for having things in common.
Yeah.
So fast forward, our company, we were originally a different company, and we got off the ground. We were doing some stuff, and then in private sector business fashion, as soon as money hits the table, people's true colors come out, and we separated. So that they went that way, and we were like, okay, here's the thing. We believe, again, mindset. You can say we got effed over. We believe we were protected. We immediately saw it as like, this is a blessing, and let's pivot. So we created law enforcement coaching. We're like, let's partner. It was really cool because our coaches, our team that we have now, they've been with us from the very beginning. We've been doing this for about 4 years officially. When everything happened, they saw the issues, the lack of integrity, and they're like, no, that's not for us. So they left, and they followed. They're like, you guys have created a thing. You guys actually get it. We're going to come with you. So keep going. So they've been with us as we've gone through had to build from the ground up with nothing after being blindsided, rebuild it. And now we're legit. We have contracts with departments. We're growing. We're doing it in a way where we haven't done any marketing. We are mission focused. We want to do a really good job for the departments that we're working with. I'm not trying to be this big, corporation that's like, oh, look at us. We have all these things. It's like, no, are we helping officers? Are we helping their families? Are we actually making an impact for the people that are right in front of us instead of chasing the almighty dollar? So our team, like, I can't speak highly enough. Everybody, I'm the only full civilian on the team. Everybody's law enforcement professionals. We have a few more people coming on in the next few weeks. We are expanding our coaches as our business grows, but we're never trying to have so many. We want to make sure that everybody is just very vetted and trustworthy and competent.
Yeah. Where are you guys working, Chris? Where are some of the departments, or if you can't name them, what are some of the states that you're currently working in?
Well, since you're in Washington State's one of the places where we're contracting. So we're actually going to be out there in the next couple of weeks, doing some seminars out there. So feel free to show up, Chris, if you'd like, and check it out if you're in the area. Tami knows where we're going to be at because that's her neck of the woods. I just say Washington State, and
Seattle,
I'm very
right? It's the Space Needle, because that's
The
like
space,
the
right?
entire state.
well. I thought Seattle was all trees and water, but I guess there's like a desert area in
Yeah,
Washington
that's where
State.
I'm at,
Where's
brother.
he? That's where he's at.
Most
He's in
two
Eastern
thirds,
Washington.
two thirds of the
Oh,
state is a geographical desert. We get about 300 days of sunshine a year.
that is so weird to me. I just cannot. I can't see that. I just see green and water. Desert is like in Arizona. Like that's where I'm from.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's so. Anyway,
East
yeah.
is it?
What?
Eastern Washington has rattlesnakes, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll feel
it
like
gets in
home.
the hundreds. It gets in the hundreds
Yeah.
during
Oh
the,
wow.
but we get all 4 seasons. So we'll typically get some days of snow. Sometimes we'll get like a foot and a half of snow, 2 feet of snow in the winter, but not usually. Usually it dusts on us here and there. Well, I can
Wow.
tell you this. I mean, Tami, you just sat there and painted the picture of what you're aiming for. And Chris, you brought up the fact that you guys are in Washington State. I was teaching a leadership class and I gave a talk. One of the blocks of instruction is employee wellness. And it was after I gave that block that one of the students had sent me a private message saying, "Hey, have you heard about law enforcement coaching?" I was like, no, I haven't. And so that's what I mentioned you guys reaching out to me. I don't think you did reach out to me. I think I reached out to you now that I think about it.
Thank you.
Uh, because it came from that class, that class saying to me, that student telling me, "Hey, that the woman," and I'm assuming it's you, Tami. I don't know. It may have been some other woman, but some woman, part of law enforcement coaching, gave a really, really good talk that obviously left enough of an impression that they were recommending your company to help other police agencies here in Washington State.
And I love that. That is the goal. We want people to know, because again, in this industry, it doesn't matter how great our marketing is. Like, it's going to come word of mouth referral. Hey, this is something that you should check out. So that's like the biggest compliment. So whoever it was that referred, like, thank you if you're watching this. But yeah, no, we've been working with all of the departments in Skagit and Island counties. We're working with Lake Stevens PD, and we're starting to grow a little bit more into Snohomish counties, and then hopefully working with expanding into Whatcom, and we're open to Washington. We've been up there. We're figuring out. It's nice because I know the area. I know the mindset. I know some of the issues. I know you guys' politics. I'm personally vested in doing a good job, because I mean, my ego's in it too. I don't want to come back to my hometown and do anything that's gonna like be like, oh, did you hear what Tami did? No, like, I want to come back proud.
It's
And I am.
it's funny. Voice inflection means so much. Did you hear what Tami did? Versus, did you hear what Tami did?
Yeah. Right.
So what are the different? I mean, I know you guys do one-on-one coaching. You guys provide different types of instruction, but I don't know exactly what. So if an agency reached out to law enforcement coaching, what is, I mean, obviously you're going to listen to them and hear what their needs are, but then what are some of the different programs, trainings, approaches that you guys bring to the table?
Tami, you're good at explaining that.
All right, here we go. All right, so we have a couple moving parts. So one, we have one-on-one sessions that you come on Zoom, you do it like, just like we'd be doing this. It's confidential. We don't record anything. We don't take notes. We don't keep files on anybody, because we made this with active duty officers and just the officer mindset, where we basically have been deemed kind of like the cushion, where maybe a department has peer support. Not all departments have peer support. Smaller departments, and even if you do, if you're really dealing with something, you're not going to want to talk in-house. And then you have the clinical side, the therapy, psychiatry, which is great. And we work in harmony and collaboration with them. We can refer out to vetted therapists, but there's some issues there. One, there's stigma. People, my dad was old school. Suck it up, buttercup. You don't talk about it. Just go back, do your job.
Yeah.
So getting an officer to actually go to therapy is not always easy. It's starting to become more acceptable and normal, but we got some room to grow there.
Yeah.
And there's a wait list for some. If you can find a good therapist that's actually culturally competent, you're lucky if you can get in within 3 months.
She or he is booked up. I'm just telling you that
absolutely.
Right now from my own experience. I have a lot of friends that are culturally competent therapists, and they have waiting lists.
Yeah. So we're kind of that middle ground where it's like, okay, No, we're not therapists, but we can talk to you. Our people have been there. Chris has gone through his dark journeys. So if you're dealing with some PTS, if you're dealing with trauma, you had a really bad call that just messed with you, and it might not have been a bad call. It could have been a close call, and that's enough to just shake you. You can talk to a coach that understands, and it's confidential. The biggest perk of the one-on-one coaching is you can talk to a coach anywhere. Someone, if you're in Washington, you can talk to somebody in Arizona, or we have New York, we have Colorado, we're all over. So they understand the A, B's, and C's, but they're not going to be in your social bubble. They're not going to be at a party one night and slip up, having a couple drinks and be like, oh, did you know that so-and-so is going through a divorce or whatever?
Yeah,
so,
totally.
And it's not going to get back to your department. So when we work with departments, if we contract with a department and the personnel are working with us, the only thing that command knows is, hey, you've had 10 sessions booked this month. We're not going to tell you who booked them. We're not going to tell you what was said. We've had some people be like, oh, can you work with this person on this topic? It's like, well, if they want to work on it, everything with coaching is what the client is looking for. It's customized to, we're not coming in like we have the answers. It's helping the person where they are. And it doesn't have to be like a mental and emotional wellness. It can be the promotional process. It can be, getting ready to retire. Retirement's huge. Like, Are you prepared? Are you prepared, not just financially, but the day after when you wake up, who are you? And what's your plan when woodworking and fishing get a little bit boring? What are you going to do? So we have our coaches that have retired. They can help with that. So that's a long-winded rant, but the coaching is really, it's an essential part, and we've created it from not just Chris and my experience, but our whole team. Like we're tight. We have meetings. We do in-person get-togethers, and we're very close. And like, hey, let's look at things. And anytime Chris and I create something that we're going to launch out, we run it by our team and we're like, hey, shoot holes in this. Come, I'm like, put your cop hat on and come call bullshit. So that I'd rather have my team call bullshit on it before we go take it out. So when we do show up to teach or to present, and everybody's looking at us like this, I'm like, that's fine.
They will be. That's just the way it is. That's the way we start.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
So
arms crossed.
Yeah. Chris, did you have something to say?
Well, I was going to say, I've been an instructor for 20 years, so I've taught cops. I know how they are, right?
Yeah.
And one, you've got to gain their trust. And we gain trust through just speaking of our personal experience and what we've been through. We'll say key terms that they identify with, and they're like, okay, these people know what they're talking about. They're not bullshitting you. They're not sitting behind a desk in the safety of a department their entire career. No, these are people that were actually out there doing stuff, and they were in the thick of it. And
we're not just preaching theory.
Yeah.
So sorry.
I can sit here and say I had a lustrous 20-year career, and it was awesome, and I was the best cop ever, and I never struggled with anything, which would be complete bullshit, because the high performers are out there constantly generating work for themselves, right? They're constantly putting themselves out there. They're constantly putting other people first. And by doing that, yes, you're going to generate some traumatic experiences. You're going to generate experience. And some of it's not going to be positive stuff. Some of it's going to be negative, because that's the nature of what we do, right? I don't ever remember a time in my career where somebody called in and said, hey, can you send an officer to my house because I'm having the greatest day. It is so awesome, and I want to share my day with that officer. Please send somebody over right now. That has never happened to me. If it happened to you, that's awesome. Please share. But I have never experienced that in my entire life. Typically, we go out on the person's worst day. Some of them, it's the worst day of their life, right? Especially if it's a loss of life. And so we have to deal with that stuff. And so what we do in law enforcement coaching is we help these officers don't carry that baggage with you your entire career. I always explain it like this. You're going to the most magical place on the planet, wherever it might be. Let's say you're going to go to Hawaii. You're going to have the vacation of your life. But as you're walking through that airport, you're carrying all this extra luggage with you, right? We call it baggage. And why? Because you're taking your whole wardrobe with you. I might need this outfit for this. I might need these shoes for this. And as you walk through the airport, you're continuously picking up baggage. Guess what? When you land, you're going to have all that baggage. It's going to be with you in the most serene place on the planet. You can't get rid of it. How are you going to enjoy yourself? Sometimes we got to just drop the baggage. We just got to leave it behind and go enjoy the moment, right? And this is what we do. We help officers deal with that. Get rid of that extra baggage. You don't have to carry it around with you, right? Enjoy the present moment.
When
Like it.
we have the coaching, we also do training. We can do, that's what we're coming up there. We're doing training for a couple different things. We're big proponents for working with the spouses and the significant others. And
Yes.
we're doing training for them as well because they don't have any support. They don't have peer support. They don't have anything. And a lot of it is just, learn as you go. And so especially the younger spouses, it's like, you have an officer, what do you do when they come home from their first death call? They might be okay, but they're still in process. And then the spouse, a lot of times they don't know, what do I do? Do I leave you alone? Like, how much do I leave? They don't know what to do. So back in my day, I guess, it was community where everybody knew each other. And if an officer died or if somebody was sick, somebody had cancer, like that's where, you had the food train coming in and everybody's there.
Yeah.
And a lot of these significant others and spouses are kind of just left on their own. And then you're left on your own with the news and social media, which has a very pointed narrative that is not actually the truth. If you go out into your communities, it's just the voice of some loud people that I don't agree with.
Yeah. Yeah. I really see this as being an area that we can get better as a big first responder community, specifically in how can we support the family? Because I'm telling you, if you have healthy families, you're gonna have healthier employees.
Yeah.
If everything's good at home, and things aren't always going to be good. We're going to have stress with kids. We're going to have health issues. We're going to have financial issues, right? We're going to I had a buddy who's a major water line broke and it flooded the entire bottom of his house. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, those things are going to happen. And if we can train, if we can invest in the family dynamic, the relational piece, it's going to make those horrible seasons be easier to weather, to get through. I mean, that's what I've seen, right? I wanted to vouch for something else that you said, Tammy. You said that officers are not going to want to speak with peers in their agency. And I'm telling you, from someone who's very outspoken with my own PTS journey, I have individuals reach out to me and they want to talk to me. And it's not that they don't trust the people in their agency to have their back on a building search. They just, what they got going on right now makes them feel extremely vulnerable.
Yep.
And they want that extra degree of separation. So having an organization like law enforcement coaching that is that degree of separation away from the agency is really helpful. Now, some officers are going to use peer support. This is not to say do away with peer support. No, peer support has its role, right? It's kind of like I don't hear you suggesting stop going to your family doc and don't get your blood work done anymore. If you got a good doc and they look at health in a bigger picture, no, go to them too. It's just there's these other resources out there that's going to address us as whole people versus these one-dimensional things that I feel like we've looked at for a long time.
Absolutely. And peer support, it is very important to have. One of the things that could improve is having the department, if you're having a peer support, send them to the wellness conferences. If they come saying, hey, I want to go take this training, if I want to go do this, do it. Because from my understanding, there's some, basic classes that you take, and then you're just kind of figuring it out. And right now, where everybody's, understaffed, we got people, there's departments where their senior officer might have 3 to 5 years in, and they're like, well, you do peer support, and you have somebody that just figured out how to like turn the sirens on, and they're like, oh, let me go take care of everybody's wellness too. Like, so we got to have some training there. And one of the things that we do with law enforcement coaching is we want to strengthen the department. We want to not just we have an exit strategy with our business. We don't want to be there with the department. I mean, if they want us there, we'll be there, but really we want to come in and provide so many tools and resources that they don't need us. They can do it, and then if they want us, awesome.
Yeah.
So
I love that. You talking about the age of a lot of our soon to be, or if not current leaders. I mean, that wasn't the way it was for Chris and I starting in our career. And I don't mean to speak for you, Chris, but I'm assuming most of the time someone had some time on before they became a supervisor. Was that your experience?
Yeah, early in my career, towards the latter half or the last few years, the for whatever reason, the agency, and I don't mean to speak ill of it, but they want to put these younger officers in those supervisory roles. And the problem with that is that these officers don't have the experience.
Yeah.
Now they're making mistakes and they're doing things that a veteran officer would never do. And that snowballed. And if if you look at the if you Google my old agency, you'll see the issues that they're seeing today because
Yeah.
it's in the news. So yeah, experience, it does matter. It
It
does help.
does.
It's the experienced officers that teach the younger officers, right?
Yeah.
How to be a good cop.
Yeah.
I can share, I don't know how much, well, we're at that 11.
You're about to tell a story, so the
Oh,
story is going to happen. Let's go with this.
well, early in my career, after I did my undercover stint and I went to patrol, working nights, and I probably had about a year on at this point. And, we went to a loud party call one night, right? A loud party, big deal. Well, it was a battle of the bands type of party. So there were hundreds of kids out there. And, I mean, it was a mess. And all of a sudden, beer bottles started getting thrown and everything. And here I am yelling at the top of my lungs at people, get out of the way, move, 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 and da da da, da, right? Because for me, being inexperienced, I always figured the louder you get, the more control you're going to have in a situation, which is
Yeah.
complete opposite, right? The louder you get, the more out of control you are. And I remember my first FTO. He's now a sergeant at this time. His name is Pete Rangel, and this guy is just a cool, calm, collected type of individual, very tactical, right? I've never seen him really yell at anybody. And he came up to me at the scene, right? He stops me. He goes, "Are you okay?" Right? He asked me that. "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, Pete. Why?" He goes, I want to make sure you're good." And I learned something at that very moment. Pete could have yelled at me, said, "Hey, shut the f up. You're out of control." He didn't do that. This shows experience.
Yes.
Or he just asked me, "Are you okay?" So now I realize, wait, I'm out of control because I'm
Yeah.
yelling, right? Look at Pete. He didn't yell, but yet he was in full control the entire time. This man, I take the way he policed, and I took that from that day forward. I took his style of policing, not getting out of control, not yelling at the top of my lungs or doing it. I would always do what would Pete do, right? If I in the most chaotic scenes that I would drive up on, what would Pete do? And I would just copy his whole style and his whole demeanor because he was that good, right?
Yeah.
And but again, it showed an experienced cop teaching a young cop how to be a good cop, right?
Yes.
So that's the importance of using experience for this younger generation. And the younger generation, they're great at technology. They're great. They can command a scene inside of their car on their little computer, their laptops, and they can start directing people where they need to go. The old school cop like me, like you, the Gen Xers, we want to get out. We want to start talking to people, right? We want to start, getting out there and getting into the dirt of things, right?
Yeah.
We got to be able to mesh both styles, right? Okay, young guy, young girl, you're good at technology. Start directing people where we need to go. I'm going to get out and I'm going to start talking to people, right?
Yeah.
We can work together, right? In that case. But anyway,
This is
Well,
why
I'm
we need training though so much because Chris, I mean, I was teaching a class here 3 weeks ago for a pre-supervisor's course, and there was a young lady in the class. She's going to be a phenomenal leader, first of all, and her agency wants her now to test for corporal, and she has 2 years on. And she was telling us as the class, she goes, this class has showed me that I am not ready. Like, I want more time. I want to be more credible. I want to have more experience. I mean, she just shows her maturity level, right? The fact that she she's knowing where she's at and where she wants to be before she has that formal leadership role. But
mhm,
here's the challenge. And I was experiencing this the last few years I was on when we were looking for the future field training officer, PTO, patrol training officer. And I would bring someone up, and people were like, no, that person's too new. And I'm like, who else are we going to choose from?
yep,
We don't have what we used to have. Before you had 7 years on, before you became an FTO, PTO. Right now, we're looking at this 2 year guy or gal. And guess what? They're the best we got. And they're really good. But I would agree if we were, in a normal season of career progressions, we would give them more time because they would get even better and then they would be that much better of a trainer. But we're just in a weird spot where we had so many people retire, so many people leave the profession early. And so now we're really leaning heavy into some of these officers that they got some time on, they got some experience, they're good, but we're calling upon them to step into significant roles sooner, which is the reason we need training, such as what you guys are offering.
Well, and that's coaching sessions, sorry. Coaching sessions are amazing because our coaches, they've been there. They've been through the promotional process and then they've been in that new leadership position. And so because there is that time gap that you don't have, most departments are operating with 3 to 7 years majority, if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And so and we have clients come to us where it's not just, hey, I want to promote. It's okay, the department told me, just like, the departments are doing that. Like we need you over here. And they're like, I'm not ready. But once they get put in that position, we all, when we step into a new position, we have imposter syndrome. How did I get here? Even as the, founders and CEOs of this company, I'll walk into a room, I'm sitting at the head of a table across from a chief or a sheriff and I'm laughing in my head, like, what? How did this happen? But, so we have that imposter syndrome within us. So being able to talk to a coach, and especially somebody that's outside your department that can offer a little bit different perspective. Hey, at my PD, we did this or whatever. So we can help expedite that process of like, here's how to be, and you do leadership training. So how do you be an effective leader? The first thing is park the ego and start listening and really listen here. Look for those little red flag indicators. My thing that I preach about, because we hear this all the time. Oh, that cop's lazy. That guy's lazy. I'm like, that is a red flag. They're burned out. Are they? And there are some lazy cops out there. I will say, like, there's some lazy people.
There's lazy humans. Yes.
There's lazy. And honestly, I'm lazy. I'm a master procrastinator and I'm lazy. But one of the best things I ever heard, I think it was Steve Jobs. He said he loved hiring lazy people because they will find the quickest way to get it done and they'll do quality. And I'm like, that's me. Like, I will get it done. It will be great. I don't want to waste time. I want to be like, let's do this.
Yeah.
So having the coaches that you can reach out to, and especially new position, being like, hey, how do I rock this?
Yes.
And then also not getting their feelings hurt when you do get a promotion, you do have a new title, and all of a sudden you don't have the friends that you thought you did.
Yeah, totally.
Chris, you talked about, like these officers that are inexperienced becoming FTOs, right? Because who else is going to do it? This is the importance of having a good FTO program. You shouldn't be training officers at the bare minimum just to be a patrol officer. No, you need to be training them to be leaders, right?
Yes.
That's part of the FTO program, not just to get off FTO. You are training future leaders when they're on FTO, and you begin in FTO, right? And really, it should begin in the academy, but that way, because again, if you don't have bodies to cover the streets and you don't have enough people to train this new generation, then if you're just training somebody just to get them through FTO and now they're going to become an FTO, we're going to have some problems here.
Yeah.
The individual agency has to take it upon themselves, to create a very strong FTO program, right? And again, you've got to train leaders. Every cop can be a leader, right? And you never know what their background is, but they could be leaders of their own family. They could be leaders within their own communities. They can be leaders outside of the department, right? We need to train future leaders, not just do the bare minimum. Let's just do enough to get them off FTO. I always hated a young officer that got off of FTO and does not know how to use the overhead lights and the spotlight, because that's happened before. How do you get through an entire FTO program and you've never used your spotlight? You've never used, these are simple little things that are just common sense, or I thought they were common sense, but apparently not. So what kind of FTOs did you have, right? Because unfortunately, sometimes we get those FTOs that are just doing the bare minimum. They want to go home on time all the time, and they're not doing a service to their officers in training. So these departments need to really create those strong FTO programs. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
And I have, while we're going off on our little soapbox tangents, the departments really need to stop just trying to check a box when it comes to wellness for their departments. We see that happen far too often, where it's just like, oh, well, we have, this app.
EAP. We have we have EAP. Okay,
We
what
have
does that mean?
EAP. We have this. We have that. They're good. And it's like, if you're questioning why you don't have great retention rates or recruitment rates, or your people are struggling, wellness, it costs on average. We've done this study. Anytime we talk to a new department, we're like, go run the numbers. How much does it cost to get somebody? I'm not even talking about the marketing budget to get them in, to get them from day one up until they're ready to go out on their own. It's on average $160,000 per person. And you're not trading that equal competency and the experience. So now you have this new person, $160,000 if they decide to stay. Whereas, like, not just our program, but any of the programs that are out there, we're like, oh, okay, well, it's like a $500 per officer investment. And they're like, oh, and when you look at the big number, like, that's too much. It's like, do you want to keep your people, or do you want to keep playing this game of playing whack-a-mole and trying to, always be behind? So the departments need to invest in really taking care of their people.
And from what I'm hearing, I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and it sounds like military special operations community is starting to recognize that the engine under the hood, our brains, is the most important piece of their warriors. The fact that they have to recognize, I mean, for so many reasons, from TBIs to the trauma that they experienced to, I mean, just all of it, they have to take care of that brain to keep it a high capacity, high functioning, high performance machine. And unfortunately, the first responder communities are sometimes a little bit behind that. And it's just, some of it is the fact that we get stuck in, this is the way we've always done it. I think that's one piece of it. And I think the other piece is a lot of times we are not we have a monopoly, other than maybe the county sheriff taking over a municipality because it's in crumbles or something like that. Other than that, no one is competing against us to provide police service. We are it. So we don't always have to be cutting edge. Whereas you look at the for-profit business community, you're either growing or you're dying.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the two, paths of a company. And so you have to be cutting edge to stay. So I feel like there's a couple different things for us within the first responder government organizations to learn from. Learn from special forces, what they're currently doing with their warriors and how they're investing in their minds. And then recognize that what is the business community doing to innovate and to provide better service. And then how do we do that? One thing I have heard probably over the last 2 years or so is I hear more and more agencies talking about wellness culture versus wellness program. And I like the shift in conversation. I think it's a start to getting them to better outcomes. How about this training in Washington? Is that open for all people? Is that just an organization's one and it's closed? Or can people, if they're hearing this, look on your website and sign up for the training?
Right now it's specific. It's for the departments that we are working under contract with. However, if somebody's watching this podcast and they do want to attend, if they just email me directly, and say, hey, I'm in Washington, we'd love to send a couple people, just message me and we'll figure that out. We want to make sure that we're helping. If they're interested, like, we want people to have this information.
Yeah.
And because we take a proactive preventative maintenance approach, we're not reactive. We want to set you up for success and, start you off wherever you're at in the career, but especially at the beginning of career. If you had a plan in place, knowing like, hey, if shit hits the fan, this is what I'm going to go do about it. Setting yourself up for success with everything we do is with coaching is to set you up for success.
I love it.
And it's to create that self-awareness. We are great problem solvers. And you had mentioned, Chris, special forces, right? I've watched a few podcasts with that because you're right. Whatever special forces are doing, law enforcement will copy it, right? They're going to mimic what's happening there. So I do watch some of these podcasts, but there's a lot of similarities there. When it comes to special forces, some of these guys, when they come out of there, they don't know, they lose their identity. What do they do now? They've got they got this specialized training in warfare, but that doesn't translate into the private sector, right? Just like law enforcement, when these officers retire, or worst case scenario, well, not worst case scenario, but they get fired. Well, they lose their identity as well, right? And what it comes down to, whether you're special forces or whether you're a first responder, it comes down to passion and purpose. We must have passion and purpose in our life. If we don't have that, we fall into a depression, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is we help normalize talking, because this is one of the similarities I noticed between the two groups
Yeah.
is they isolate, right? They
Mhm.
isolate because nobody else understands them other than the guys that they went to war with. But they isolate themselves, and they don't want to talk about this stuff because it's weakness. It's considered weakness, and it's like, no, we have to normalize. That's all part of the warrior culture, right? Is we're going to experience things that a majority of the public will never see or experience, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully. And it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk and let it go, right? Now, when you get out of this career, what are you doing now to plan for that? I don't care if you're 10 years into your career. What if you get injured? What if you get hurt and you can't do this anymore? What's your backup plan? See, that's the thing. We always have a backup plan. We always have to have a backup plan because there's no guarantee you're going to make it through a 20-year career. What are you going to do that's going to give you passion and purpose if you have to leave your position today?
Yes.
This is some things that we need to think about, but we also need to talk about it too. So,
I
Well,
like
and
it.
we were just having a conversation with somebody the other day, and in other professions where, everybody knows law enforcement's one of the hardest professions that there is. You're seeing things, you guys are being exposed to stuff that the majority couldn't even fathom. But then you have these other, you have, trauma nurses, you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have these people in high stress professions. And for them, if they have like a mental breakdown or they end up with some sort of addiction, depression, or whatever, they have programs in place that they can take a sabbatical, basically go get well, and then they can test out, or however they do it, to go back into their position. Law enforcement, you have a series of all this stuff happen, you have a mental break, you screw up, or you're drinking too much or whatever, you're done, you're out. And then you have a reputation where in this day and age, the departments, to be like you said, you're either growing or you're dying. If you're just discarding people because they're hurting, they're showing you, hey, I'm not okay, whether they're able to do the job or not, the departments really need to say, hey, let's be there for you. And there are some departments, we're very blessed to be working with some very forward thinking command staff chiefs and departments that are like, we want to take care of our people, whether they're with us or not.
Yes.
And that is so important. We got to stop just saying, oh, you're broken, you're defective, bye. That's not okay.
I agree. Hey, for folks that want to, like you said, Tammy, want to maybe reach out to you guys, where are you guys present? What's the best way for people to connect with either one of you, Chris or Tammy, or law enforcement coaching?
Yeah. Our website is lawenforcementcoaching.com. Our emails are very easy. It's chris@lawenforcementcoaching.com or Tammy, Tami, @lawenforcementcoaching.com. And then we're on the socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're not on whatever Twitter is, X now. And we're not on TikTok, but we're on the other ones. So if you put in law enforcement coaching, we should be the first to pop up.
You're not doing songs and dances on TikTok? I'm disappointed.
Not yet. There's time.
I stopped making time for that. I got tired of that pretty quick. And if people are on the talk tick, that's what I like to do, just to screw around with it. Then rock on, do your thing. But I'm just not into it.
That's not my thing.
Chris and Tammy, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff, and you all have given me an awful lot of yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Y'all have a great day. Wow, folks, what did you think of Chris and Tammy's perspectives? I loved hearing about Chris's career. I loved hearing about Tammy running radar at the age of 4, and then this path that they were both on separately that eventually led them to meeting each other and beginning their own relationship, but then the work that they're doing by taking the things they've learned and really working to help our first responder communities. Hey, Jaimie and I want to hear from you. How are we doing here on the podcast, folks? There's a few different ways for you to support us or communicate back to us. First, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That will cause the next episode to alert you to come up in your dashboard. You can also rate and review us if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. There's 5 stars waiting on our main page. And when you give us a 5-star rating, that makes us more viewable to other listeners. And that's what we want to be. We want to support more people and offer up the resources that we're bringing here on the show. But you've heard me say it. If we haven't earned 5 stars, folks, keep your stars. Just keep them. They're yours. Instead, shoot us an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make it better. Future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribes. Take care of each other. God bless.